Man's best friend is more than a companion of our feature story, Guide Dogs for the Blind. We'll learn more about this vital relationship and how these special animals are trained. Travel to St. Joseph Parish in Toms River, New Jersey. This week's Parish Profile. Share with us its remarkable past and plans for the future. These stories and more on tonight's Reel to Reel.
Good evening, I'm Pat Shelton, and welcome to Reel to Reel. The King holiday has just passed, and my guest tonight has worked since the inception of the idea for it to be adopted as a national holiday. We'll meet him and understand why. This week's Parish Profile takes us to Toms River, New Jersey, where we'll visit St. Joseph's Parish. These animals are seen in restaurants and on airplanes and many places where other animals are not admitted. They're guide dogs for the blind. And our feature story this evening gives us a glimpse into the care and training of these very special animals. Truly, man's best friend.
One summer afternoon during the early 1920s, Maury Frank was sparring with a friend when fate delivered a blow that would change his life forever and eventually affect the lives of thousands of others in years to come. That punch was the last thing Maury would ever see. From that moment on, he would live in a world of darkness. Just when Maury thought that he was destined to stumble through life with only a cane as his guide, he was told about a woman in Switzerland who claimed to be able to train a dog to act as the eyes for a blind person. Maury went to Switzerland and was introduced to Buddy, a German shepherd.
Come here.
Buddy and Maury may have been the first guide dog team, but they were not to be the last.
Good girl. Buddy's a good girl.
Their remarkable courage pioneered the way for similar organizations in the United States, like Guide Dogs for the Blind. Today, more than 200 blind persons receive guide dogs each year. Guide dog puppies are raised primarily by 4-H club members. These young adults are from 4-H clubs in San Diego and Los Angeles, California, and they are a very vital part of the guide dog program. The training of a guide dog goes through several important phases. These 4-H members are known as raisers, and today they are both going to school.
Today is a field day at Chino. We have field days all over the state of California, also in Utah, Colorado, Arizona, so that 4-H raisers can take their puppies through simulated situations that the blind people would experience when they're with their guide dogs. This way, people can judge whether or not the dog is accepting the socialization process, whether they're afraid of objects, if they need more work in going up and down stairways, if they need work on surfaces or whatever. It's a good experience for them, and it teaches the dogs not to be afraid many times.
The lessons learned today will help these raisers and their dogs prepare for advanced training.
Well, they judge you on the way that you work with the dog and the way that your dog responds to you.
We have a test that they judge on what we know, like about our dogs and training our puppies and stuff. Newman, sit. Good boy.
Hi there. What you doing, huh? Nice clean teeth, yeah?
At this station, the dogs are checked for grooming. From clean ears to clipped nails, no detail is neglected in the care of each animal. To become part of the guide dog program, each individual and their family must pass strict guidelines established by the Guide Dogs for the Blind Foundation.
The main thing they've got to have is the whole family needs to want the dog. They need to have a fenced yard for the dog and be willing to come to the meetings and train the dog the way that they should.
Donna Zick is not only a 4-H leader, she is also one of the most experienced guide dog trainers in the country.
In 4-H, you learn by doing, and I have. In fact, our daughter raised 10 guides, our son raised 3, my husband raised 1, I'm on my 10th guide, and our granddaughter is raising her 4th. So that's 26 dogs in 3 generations.
The job of the raisers is to teach the dog how to interact with others. But quite often, the teacher becomes the student. The dog literally becomes part of the raiser's family, and they do everything together as a team. A Saturday afternoon shopping spree is the perfect way to introduce a guide dog to the hectic world of humans. The dog must learn to negotiate his blind master through all sorts of distractions. And from his point of view, there's a lot of stuff to watch out for. Once it took an act of Congress to allow guide dogs into public facilities. Today, seeing a guide dog in a mall is as common as taking a cookie break between shops.
I think it's great that the dogs are allowed to work in the mall, and especially to train them, and that's what the lady said, you were training them to get them used to people. That's wonderful.
A lot of love and bonding pass between the dog and the raisers. And when the time comes for the raisers to say goodbye to their furry friends, it's a day that's filled with mixed emotions.
We work with the dogs till they're about 18 months old, so that's about 16 months. And it is really hard to give them up. It's really sad and emotional day. I've done it a couple times, so it's getting a little bit easier every time because the people that I meet that get my dogs are so nice and just in general great people that get them. And we get to meet them and everything, which is nice.
Guide dog graduates like Dodger and Winchester make the sad goodbyes all worthwhile. Without them, people like Evelyn and Karen would be left in the dark.
I used to be so afraid that I didn't even want to walk out the door, past my neighbor's door, to check out the mailbox to see if we got anything. I was always so afraid somebody was watching me and I might make a mistake, you know. And now when I got my first dog, I went to college and got jobs, and just, it totally changed me completely, my whole personality. Tell me, do you fetch? Do you be good boy? Tell me. Yes, roo, roo.
I wouldn't be able to function very well without the dogs. When I first was growing up and going to high school, I had a cane, and the canes don't take you around open manholes. They don't take you around. When I was going to school, we had a spiral staircase with a globe underneath it, and I would always continually run into the globe. The dogs take you around things like that, for one thing, and you just really feel a lot more secure with the dog, and I wouldn't be without one.
The cost of putting a blind person and a guide dog together is about $12,000. All of this love is given free of charge to those in need, thanks to the wonderful people at Guide Dogs for the Blind, the 4-H raisers, and most of all, man's best friend.
Most of us have great compassion for the blind. It's so gratifying to meet some of the people who put that compassion into action. The raisers, as they're called, the trainers of the guide dogs. This week's parish profile is a splendid example of how a parish is born, grows, and thrives. Let's visit Toms River, New Jersey, and St. Joseph's Parish, this week's parish profile.
As Monsignor Ladzinski, current pastor, looks over construction blueprints for expansion, the future looks bright for St. Joseph's in Toms River, New Jersey. Today, a parish of over 4,000 families that had very humble beginnings. At a time when larger urban dioceses were suffering from vicious anti-Catholicism, the tiny seaside hamlet of Toms River remained relatively untouched by the riotous violence. Ironically, St. Joseph's was founded when the Reverend Peter Giacchetti traveled from St. John's in Lakehurst to say Mass in the home of a non-Catholic for 7 worshipers on May 24, 1880. The dedication of a wooden structure measuring 18 by 25 feet as the first sanctuary in 1882 was a milestone. However, a struggling parish membership necessitated making St. Joseph's a mission of St. John's, Lakehurst in 1884. Lack of parishioners and funds did not inhibit growth. Early records confirm communication with the bishop, the election of church officials, trustees, marriages, and baptisms. Membership had progressed steadily enough to construct and dedicate a new church by 1904. Within 5 years after the Reverend Patrick Powers assumed pastorship in 1905, expansion took a different focus. To minister to the faithful of the peripheral regions, St. Joseph's required 2 missions of its own. In that same year, the assignment of Reverend Joseph Linane brought St. Joseph's its first permanent priest and led to the construction of a rectory. By 1926, the number of families in the parish had grown steadily enough for Father George Welsh to endeavor to build the church's first school. Though the Great Depression temporarily thwarted construction plans, St. Joseph's saw the graduation of its first class of 8th graders in 1934. Taught by the Sisters of St. Dominic of Newburgh, New York, they and other students, including non-Catholics, attended classes in a single-room social hall which had been built behind the church on Hooper Avenue. In 1942, a significant turn of events took place. St. Joseph's acquired another mission, St. John's in Lakehurst, a reversal of roles that some parishioners undoubtedly regarded with great pride. 1949 marked the arrival of Father Lawrence Donovan. His pastorship and achievements left an indelible mark on St. Joseph's, which is still evident today, 4 years after his death. Ground was broken in November of 1951 for a complex housing a church, social hall, and school. On August 16, 1952, the dedication ceremony for the complex was held. Comparing needs to available resources, this combination was deemed necessary, and it is still in use today. The construction of St. Joseph's High School in the 1960s marked an educational milestone not only for St. Joseph's, but for students from Ocean County and Monmouth County as well. During the Mass celebrating the parish's 100th anniversary, Bishop John Reese announced that the high school would be known as Monsignor Donovan High School, in honor of then Monsignor Donovan's contributions to Catholic education. Paralleling and often surpassing the physical growth of St. Joseph's are the parish community activities. Today, St. Joseph's provides spiritual and social functions through numerous organizations. Certainly, the parish has been blessed with many resourceful pastors, but the legacy of parishioner participation has always been a prominent element in its steady and prosperous growth. The devotedness of the parish community has been a solid foundation upon which this remarkable parish has found success. Evidence of a rich and spiritual parish life is illustrated in published bulletins, newsletters, and publications. Most importantly, through the tireless efforts of people like Mrs. Rita Carney, the history of St. Joseph's has been preserved for many years to come. Looking forward to the 1990s, St. Joseph's once again finds itself on the verge of necessary physical expansion. Despite obvious or unforeseeable obstacles that may lay before them, this is a parish of people that will undoubtedly achieve its goal.
When I first came to St. Joseph's, I was told about a tragic incident that happened here in Toms River in 1984, and it was described in a book, in a miniseries called Blind Faith. Well, ever since I came here, I found living faith demonstrated by the people of St. Joseph's Parish and Toms River. Reference to the future, I guess my dream is the dream of Jesus Christ, that I and the Father may be one. Unity among our people, demonstrated in charity, but shown in so many ways of taking care of one another.
Stay tuned for a conversation about the King holiday controversy right after these messages.
Ago, this man's last shred of dignity was stripped right off his back. Where do you go when your world is this cold, this cruel? He got help at the Salvation Army. They got help from the United Way. Thank God the United Way got help from you. The United Way, it brings out the best in all of us.
Hello from St. Joseph's Grade School and Monsignor Donovan
long time, this nation has marked the birthdays of great men like George Washington and Abraham Lincoln. What these men did and what they said is just as much in line with what Dr. Martin Luther King stood for. For a long time, my guest tonight has worked for the adoption of the National Martin Luther King Jr. holiday. And obviously, his work has not been in vain. I'd like you to meet Andrew Henshel. Andrew Todd Henshel is the president of the Young Democrats of Philadelphia. Welcome, Andrew.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for letting me be here.
You know, Andrew, even though the King holiday has been adopted nationally, it's still coming under fire. There's still an awful lot of controversy about it. A lot of people will not accept it. And of course, we know about the state of Arizona, who out and out have just absolutely decided not to accept it, acknowledge it. But you have been for the idea since the very beginning. Why has this fascinated you? Why have you thought this was a wonderful idea?
Well, my interest in this began, I might say, at an early age, in my teenage years.
Mm-hmm.
And it began because I was seeing movies and films and programs about Dr. King and his great contributions to our nation and to the world as a whole. And that led to my belief that the bills in Congress that were in Congress for some time for National Holiday needed to be supported. And I started writing letters and getting involved with that campaign and appearing on radio shows, going to marches and demonstrations and so forth.
At King's death, you were just a little boy.
Yes.
And yet you became active politically and for this cause when you were just a teenager. But you're a young white man. And I, knowing you before, I've known that you were more passionate about this than almost any young black man that I've known. What about Dr. King captured your attention?
Well, I think that his contributions apply to all people in terms of brotherhood and unity, and I think that's what's needed in this country and in this world now more than ever. So that was part of it. And also the fact that he was striving for changes nonviolently. I think that's something that needs to be emphasized in terms of the holiday and all year round, that we need some changes made, and Dr. King's inspiration should inspire all of us to work for those changes in a nonviolent, positive manner. And he encouraged people to get involved, to vote, to register to vote. And at a time when we see declining numbers of people voting, we need an emphasis on those ideals of getting involved and making a change and voting and speaking out when you think there's something that's wrong that needs to be addressed. So I think all those things are part of the movement for a holiday that I was proud to participate in. I think that it applies to all people, and we need that kind of brotherhood and unity that he strived for and gave his life for.
What do you think about the activities in the state of Arizona, Andrew?
I think it is very unfortunate that right now we have 3 states, Arizona, Montana, and New Hampshire, that do not participate in the national holiday, that do not have official state observances. However, I think that people are trying to make that change. The governor of Arizona, Rose Mofford, who's the present governor at this time, is pushing for the state holiday. And there are also movements in New Hampshire and Montana. And I'm hopeful that in the 1990s we will see the change that all 50 states together will observe the holiday as one nation. And there are many other countries around the world that observe the holiday at this time. I think it's a positive development that people around the world are working together for this.
Andrew, can you speculate on what the course of events might have been had Dr. King survived? What if he were living today? Where would we be as a people?
I think that we would be in a better situation in terms of the world situation, in terms of the national situation. I think that he would be pressing us to move forward on domestic priorities such as housing and health care. We might not have such a problem with the homeless and with education and other programs being neglected. I think that he would be pushing for us to move forward, and also that international conflict should be addressed in a nonviolent fashion. I think that he would be pushing for us to abolish apartheid in South Africa more aggressively and supporting sanctions against that nation.
Do you see any other black leader on today's horizon who can even, parallel Dr. King? Is there anyone, in your personal opinion, who comes close?
It's really hard to make a comparison, I would say, on the international scene. Somebody who's inspired many people is possibly Nelson Mandela or Bishop Tutu from South Africa. But I don't think there's anybody in this country at this time who quite measures up. He was quite a remarkable man, and that's why we have a national holiday for him. It's hard to make that comparison.
Andrew, this past month, we have had some very outstanding celebrations honoring Dr. King in the greater Delaware Valley area. But during that time, you were in Atlanta, his home. Could you tell us quickly, what did you witness down there in Atlanta?
Well, every year at this time,
We've got about 30 seconds.
Every year at this time, there is an observance that takes place at the Martin Luther King Center for Nonviolent Social Change. And Mrs. King and members of the family speak out there on what they think needs to be done to continue the dream, to keep the dream alive.
And you were there?
And I was there.
And they spoke, and I suppose the feeling was just overwhelming.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Andrew, thank you so much for explaining why you are a proponent of the King holiday. And I want to say Andrew perhaps has single-handedly registered more people in the state of Pennsylvania than any other individual. Thank you for being with us, Mr.
Thank you.
Henshel. And now, won't you stay with us for more of Reel to Reel?
These moments are made possible for 20,000 more people every year by the Leukemia Society of America. The Leukemia Society of America. We're gaining every moment.
The tragedy of child abuse takes many forms, from verbal assaults to hurtful blows. But it is preventable, and we all have a role to play. If you know of a parent having difficulty, reach out, sit down and talk. And if you're having difficulty, get help for yourself. Talk to a friend. Sign up for a parenting class. Take time out. Don't take it out on your child.
We welcome your comments, suggestions, and donations and encourage you to write us at Reel to Reel, St. Charles Seminary, 1000 East Wynwood Road, Overbrook, PA 19096, or call us during regular business hours at 668-9842.
Our senior update feature introduces us to some dedicated seniors who labor lovingly for the American Brotherhood for the Blind. But first, let's pause for a prayerful meditation.
Heavenly Father, we thank you for the precious gift of love. Love is the force, the sign of your presence in our lives, which enables us to be about your work. Enable us to love you in the deeds that you place before us daily in our lives. Enable us to love you in truth by being faithful to the challenges of our faith and by enabling us to accept the challenges that you present to us. We thank you for setting us a task which demand our best efforts and for leading us to accomplishments which satisfy and delight us. We thank you also for those disappointments and failures that lead us to acknowledge our dependency on you alone. Above all, we thank you for the precious gift of love, for the truth of your word, for the example of your life, for your steadfast obedience by which you overcame temptation, for your dying through which you overcame death. help us to truly love in deed and in truth. Amen.
I'm in a place that you could almost call sacred or holy. People like Barbara Bush and Mamie Eisenhower and Lady Bird Johnson have acknowledged the existence of the American Brotherhood for the Blind, and it's all made possible by seniors who volunteer thousands and thousands of hours to bring light and reading and insight to the blind children of this country. Dozens of senior volunteers make this printing house for blind children a reality. A blind mother can read to her sighted child with twin vision books, or a blind child can follow along with Braille, a book that's read aloud to him or her. All of this was the idea of Jean Norris, a senior who created the service 25 years ago.
One day I heard a blind mother say, "My children don't understand why I can't read their books to them." And so I went home that night. I read to all my children as they were growing up every night. And I just took their books and I started brailing.
Harry Schuchman is 81 years of age. Harry is a retired Hollywood studio musician who once played with Tommy Dorsey. Harry taught himself to make wooden molds. These are transferred by heat to raised images which teach the blind how to identify objects. Harry also researches and writes the texts of the Braille books. He spent 5 years at this, years that he calls wonderful.
I get up in the morning and I have no doubt of what's going to happen today because I can't get out of my shower fast enough or have my breakfast fast enough to get out and do what I have to do today.
The amazing thing is that all the funds for this project is done by blind people themselves. You can get a hold of them by writing to the American Brotherhood for the Blind at 1800 Johnson Street, Baltimore, Maryland, 21230. I'm Doris Winkler with Senior Update.
The American Brotherhood for the Blind, Guide Dogs for the Blind. As one who has a particular soft spot in my heart for those with vision problems, I invite you to support all organizations who work for our blind brothers. Who knows, one of these days, one of us might be the recipient of someone's goodwill. At this time, our country is at war. If Dr. King were alive, I have no doubt that he would vehemently oppose any war, as he did the Vietnam War. All we can do at this time at home is pray for those involved in the conflict and write and support them as best we can. Let's pray for our brothers and sisters abroad. And God willing, I'll be with you next week on Reel to Reel. Good night.
Jesus proclaimed, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." You can better learn and practice this life-giving message by coming to our Catholic Charismatic Teaching Day on Saturday, March 9th at Cardinal Doherty High School in Philadelphia. Some 25 seminars will help you to learn how Jesus can be the way, the truth, and the life for each of us. Contact our office at 668-HOPE if you can join us.